So, good day and welcome back. And today we got a new plant family to go over, which includes some very important plants. So, in previous talks, we've talked about the Brassicaceae, the mustard family that is important for providing people with the vegetables. We talked about the Lamiaceae or the mint family, that's important for providing people with some of the herbs and some of the spices. And today we get to talk about the family that is going to be very important for providing people with some medicine. And it's going to be one of the oldest cultivated plants for medicinal values. That one, this one, and also marijuana, cannabis are going to be very old cultivated plants because keep in mind, when somebody is in pain, they don't really worry about food. They don't really worry about sleeping sometimes, or they cannot sleep. All you really worry about taking care of that pain or removing that pain so that you can go on with your daily life. So yes, although food is important, taking care of pain, removing whatever is ailing you, it's also going to be much more important. So keep that in mind. So we get to talk about the poppies, and here's the California poppy, which is the California state flower. So we get to talk about the Papaveraceae, the poppy family. And what you can notice is that they're all going to be pretty much a cold season plant. So we have most of them are going to come from northern hemisphere. California does play a very nice role in poppy diversification. So we are a hotspot for different types of poppies that we have here. So we'll get to see some of the native poppies, including the California poppy. A few more larger individuals make it into Central and South America, but most of them are going to be somewhat of a cold loving, cool season. And for us, we are going to be able to grow them during the winter here in Southern California. So 44 genera, we're not going to see 44. We're going to see the more common ones and about 760 species, give or take a few. But here is a very nice photograph of wild California poppies as they are displayed during some of the nice rainy years that we have here in Southern California, including some of the other California native wildflowers such as Phacelia and or popcorn flower. So here's another image of some of those poppies growing in our area. And here's the Iceland poppy that we have seen before. And so we'll use this one to look at the different parts of the flower. So the first thing that you need to be aware is that the poppies are going to have 2 to 3 sepals. The sepals, as you may already know, are important for protecting the flowers during the bud stage. So it's very fragile. And so you can see them here on this bud that is still developing. The flower is completely covered by the sepals. Once the flower has opened and the petals have expanded, the job of the sepal is pretty much done. So in most cases, they will fall off shortly after the flower opens. And so they're going to drop off. Now they're going to give way for the flowers to be displayed and attract the pollinator. So you may or may not have seen the sepals because they may fall off and the wind will blow them out of the way. When we look inside the flower, we have several important components. We're going to have 4 to 6 petals all around the flower. And then inside, we're going to have numerous stamens. That's going to be the main thing with the flower because they will probably be providing the pollinator with pollen. Poppies do not provide nectar, it's just pollen, which is rich in protein and amino acids for the pollinators. And then we're going to have one stigma with a very short style and the ovary that would be right in the center. When we look at the close-up, we see that the stigma is kind of hairy or has hair-like protrusions, and that's so that the pollen can get stick to it as the insect moves around. And here we have the stamens with the pollen being exposed for the insect or the animal to take away. Inside the ovary, if we cut the flower in half, we see the stamens, and then we see the ovules. There's going to be a lot of ovules inside that will later become the seeds of the poppy. And the pollination is going to be very general, as any insect that happens to want a lot of pollen for the protein and the amino acids is welcome to come around. So we have some of the honeybees that will have no problem. We have some beetles that would also find a nice place for a meal and also finding a mate. We have some flies and even some of our native bees here taking the pollen from this California poppy. So any insects, it's open for all, no big sophistication on the flowers. And then once the pollination is achieved, now we have the development of the fruit. And so here is the capsule as it's split in half, and here's a different view of that. And what's also interesting about the poppies is that the capsules will have a pore. So once the seeds are mature and ready to be dispersed, there's going to be an opening and several of them throughout this capsule that will allow the seeds to be dispersed. And it's usually going to be the wind that is going to move the fruit left and right. And as it does that, it's just going to eject the seeds, fly them away from the plant, and remain in the soil until there's some nice water and the season turn changes. And so we have lots of seeds. And those are going to be the seeds that you may find in your bagels. So yes, not the California, the opium poppy seeds are the ones in bagels. And yes, there is a little bit of the opium or the opioid or the codeine inside the seeds. And that is why when anybody is going to be taking a drug test, they always ask the question whether or not you have eaten a bagel, because it may come as positive that you're a drug addict or that you have been ingesting some kind of codeine or opioids. Until if you say you have, then they can do a more thorough analysis, and obviously it's going to come out as negative. But just be aware that ingesting the seeds does have a very small amount of the opioid compounds, and that is going to be what you're going to find. And then from the seeds, they can extract the oil that is used for painting primarily, so it's not consumable by people. So I guess for very fancy paintings, it is a very good oil to use. But most people will know it as their bagels or on top of their bagels with sesame seeds. Your poppy seed bagel will be very popular. And then when we look at the different types of poppies that we may encounter, Schultzia californica is going to be the more popular here because of the California poppy. We may have a nice uh, display of them when we have the blooming period. We have the Poppy National Reserve in Southern California. And so here's some that were in full flower and showing us their great color. Now, the orange, and there's going to be some variations. The orange is going to be primarily the wild form, but because they are popular, people have started to select and hybridize them. And so now there are some lighter color, there's some pink, there's some yellow, and they're almost getting to white. And there's a deeper orange almost getting into red, and there's a lighter pink or a darker pink right there. So just be aware, these are now cultivated California poppies that you may find growing around the city or around your neighborhood. And here's the beginning of the flower buds. So here's where you have those sepals covering the flower. Here is as the flower is getting ready to open. So you see the sepals as they're falling off. And so here's the flower when it's ready to open. And now the sepals have flown away and now they're gone. and you will never see them. And here's the capsule for the California poppy as it's beginning to develop. So here's the different poppy flowers getting ready to open. And here's a very nice photograph of the wild poppy in Griffith Park with the wild canterbury bells or Phacelia. And then as you go into some of the mountains, you might have a mountain or a Schultzia minutifolia, small leaf. This is a very tiny, uh, short range, short distribution, but it's out there. Or if you happen to go into the range, we have a Schultzia ramosa, which is native to Baja California. Or we have a few others in cultivation. This is Hunimania, which is sold in some of the nurseries. So here's where the flowers are getting ready to open and the sepals. And here's where they have opened and shown you the different characteristics that you find in the poppy family. And there's the beginning of the fruit or that capsule. And here's a lot of beetles in the wild that are responsible for pollinating this flower. And back to California, we have a very nice cutesy poppy that is known as cream cups, Platystem californicum. And in the right season, when there's a good bloom period, you may see them out if you go hiking. So here's a very nice, very happy plant. Sometimes you see them with the yellow tips on the petals, sometimes you don't. And so here's a very nice display of them. And here's some of the open flowers and the buds, as you can see the sepals. And there's the flower when it's just finished opening. Very nice, a little bit unusual to find, especially in cultivation, but every so often some nurseries may sell them. Or we have the wind poppy, Stylomecon heterophylla, which is also native to California. Wind poppy because it just blows left and right or upside, left and right with the wind. So this photograph was when we found it in San Quintin, Mexico, growing in the wild area. And so here it is, very nice. And so there's the flowers. And this one happened to be eaten by some caterpillars. So there's some native caterpillars. Probably they'll turn into a sphinx moth, and they had no problem in devouring the immature fruits of this poppy. Or we have the more shrubby-like Romnea coulteri, commonly known as Matilda hop poppy. And here's an escapee in Griffith Park, probably planted by one of the neighbors, and it has now taken over. It grows through underground rhizomes and it can spread very far and very wide. But when it's in full flower, it is going to be a very nice display. It does have some very nice fragrant flowers. It is commonly known as fried egg poppy because I guess it looks like a fried egg when you look at it from different angles. And so we have this also California native plant that you may find wild in some of the hills and some of the mountains. Or when you venture away from different areas, we may find other relatives. So here's a different Romnea, more native to Baja California. Or we have a few that are going to be very spiny. And so here's Romnea trichocalyx. And what I want to point out is that the sepals are going to be very hairy and they can definitely hurt you. So be very careful with it. Or we have a few of the other shrub individual. Here's Dendromecon. And this one is native to the Channel Islands. Catalina does have some native ones as well as the mainland. And so here it is in cultivation and or growing in somebody's yard. And here's the flower. So this is a perennial shrub that people who like native plants and want a nice flower can opt for growing. Here's how big they can get. So be aware. This is Dendromecum half-40. It can get quite large if you let it get out of control. So this one is taller than the car here in a garden here in Long Beach, where it has been allowed to grow very large. And here's at South Coast Botanic Garden, where it looks very nice. And that's where this photograph of the flower came from. At Theodore Payne Foundation, this is their display of a shrub, and here's the flowers for that. And then there's our Germany Mexicana, known as prickly poppy or chicalote would be the common name. And yes, it is prickly. The fruits are prickly, the leaves are prickly, every single part of them is prickly. And when the flowers open, you can see the leaves that are very sharp. Not a very good plant to walk on top, especially if you don't have any shoes, or very difficult to remove because it's just very spiny. And then we have a Agenemy minuta that also has a lot of spikes here being visited by a honeybee. I look in the background, the leaves, the fruits have a lot of spines. And here's a yellow one that I happened to find in Cuba. And there's also what is a plant that is known as bleeding heart, Dicentra spectabilis. And there's going to be many dicentras. So here's the typical flower, and you can see the fruit here beginning the capsule. So there's the beginning of the fruit. And here's a California native, Erendoferia. We happen to spot this one in Baja California. So there's the flowers of this very nice dicentra or dicentra-like plant. And then if we venture into South America, then you have the plume poppy. These are going to be very large tropical plants. Macleya. It also grows through rhizomes, so it's kind of becomes established, and then it's very difficult to remove, or just every so often it just pops up in different areas. And there's kind of the poppy-like flowers, very small, nothing as showy as the regular poppies. And there's the beginning of the capsule as the fruit. And there's a close-up of the flowers. Or we have Boconia, which is a South American. This is Central American taken in Chiapas, but it's a small tree or a very large plant compared to some of the other poppies that we may see. And so here's one that I happened to take when it was already done blooming and you have the fruit. Or in eastern United States, we have Fumaria, uh, highly used in the gardens. Here we have different colors. Every so often you may see them here in Southern California, but they prefer a much colder habitat to be very happy. Or we have Cordiales here, which now the flowers have a very long spur. And this is from Kew Botanic Garden. And here's a few other Corydales, this one from Turkey, being displayed at Kew Botanic Gardens. And so this would be the European members of the poppies that you have around here. Or here's another one with yellow flowers. And this one is Central Asia. Uh, and here's another one with white flowers. And I've never grown them. I just seen them in Botanic Garden. This one is from Afghanistan. And here's some that we found in Peru. So this one's growing wild, and I was able to take the photograph of this individual. And then we have the Eo Mekon, which is the plume poppy. So here's the flowers. And every so often, I wish I would grow the blue poppy. This one is native to the Himalayas, obviously not my photograph. But I keep saying I've gotten the seeds and I've just never gotten the chance to really grow it or see it in person. But it's probably going to be a very nice once we grow it. And then if we go back here to California, here's Papaveraceae californica, and this is the fire poppy. And fire poppy because you would see great numbers of them after fire. So this is considered a fire follower. And after the fire Griffith Park, I was able to locate this individual to take the photograph. So Papaveraceae californica, the California fire poppy. So be aware, some of them you may have to wait until a fire to be able to see them. Or if you ever venture into Europe, the European countryside during the right season can be littered with Papaveraceae or the European poppy. Here's the flowers, and don't miss a chance to take a photograph with some of them in the wild. And those have become the symbol for the veterans. So the commemorates poppy during the right holiday. They're often sold in different areas. And then the more important one is going to be Papaveraceae somniferum, which is going to be the opium poppy. Very old plant that changed history because during this time, Europe and Asia was completely depended on them because they were addicted to the compounds or the opium. And so it is a plant that has changed history. It is a plant that still is important to us. So here it is when it's in cultivation. And there's the beautiful, very large flowers. So here in Cerritos, somebody was growing it. It is not illegal to grow the plant. You can grow it and harvest the seeds if you want to put them on top of your bagels. So here's a form that is has a lot more petals, and it's a lot bigger. And so what happens after the seed, the flowers, then you get the fruit or the capsule, and it is from the capsule that they typically harvest the opium. So we have the capsule beginning there, and we have a mature capsule here that people will every day or routinely go through there and using a razor blade, they will make tiny cuts. And as a response from the injury, the puppy is going to release the sap that will block off the injury. And it is within this sap that when it hardens, it gets collected into what is known as pure opium. So yes, there are compounds in there that are give the opium to, or where people have get the opium from. And so this would be the sap that people in the days would smoke, and they would go into a very docile sleeping trance, and they'll be very happy. So yes, the opium it is harvested from the seed pods of the opium poppy. And if you break a stem, it'll normally bleed as well, and that you can also harvest it. So there's the opium coming out of the stem of that plant. But we still have the codeine. So when you take some of the more harmful components or the addictive components, well, maybe not entirely, you do have some very nice painkillers, the codeines. Unfortunately, they are addictive, so people do may sometimes get addicted to them. But if you want a very good painkiller, this is nothing's gonna beat the codeine or the product that comes out of the poppies. And during my youth, we had the heroin problem. So yes, when you take the opium and then you process it, refine it, then you get what is known as the heroin, and obviously that causes a lot of problems with people being addicted to heroin and children being born addicted to heroin. And so that we also have to thank the poppy. But looking at poppies as a plant, it is a beautiful flower. Here's some more selections that kind of look like a chrysanthemum, lots of petals. Here they are growing in a garden with the beautiful South Coast Botanical Garden with the beautiful flowers. And here's some more with the seed pod. So don't blame the plant. The plant is innocent. It is people who find different uses for them. And here's some more just to show you how nice and variable they can be. Here's some that we've grown in our garden and the different colors that you may come across. And a few more right there. And to finalize, here's the Monet garden display. So in a trip that I took to New York, they had a display by the painter Monet, and so they had a rendering of one of his paintings in person. And so we have the foxgloves and the delphiniums and a bunch of other plants, including the poppies, because they were part of Monet. And so with that, I wish you a great day. Take care.